All right, reacting to a podcast about my mom's murder. The deep dive with Nick Babel, take 0. So, I talked about this in an Instagram reel last month. It's in March now. Normally, I would do this video to raise awareness for domestic violence on the anniversary of my mom's murder, but we put a conference on that week. I shot a real Instagram reel reacting to this podcast, just like my initial emotional feelings last month, and then I tried to shoot this a couple of different times, and I got pissed both times. So I'm going to do it for a third time, and I think I have better perspective on this. In the interest of full disclosure, I have reached out to the guy who put on this podcast. We messaged in DM. I offered to come on his podcast and set the record straight. He gets a lot of shit wrong here. He reached back out and made it sound like, he might be interested, but honestly, he seemed really shocked that, I was alive, and that I'm somebody, and that he made such a huge mistake. So, anyway, we'll see what happens there. I'll send him the link to this video when I'm all done. But I have not listened to this in a month, so and honestly, I don't remember a lot of the stuff that was in it. So my reaction will be pretty raw in terms of how it goes down. So let's go ahead and let's get into it.
The Deep Dive with Nick Babel.
And I'll include the link in the description if you want to listen to the whole thing. We're going to go through the whole thing.
Welcome to the Deep Dive with Nick Babel. I'm your host, Nick Babel. Today I'm going to be dipping my toe into one of the most popular podcast genres going, true crime. This is a murder case that is near to me as I've really heard about it my whole life. It took place on the street I grew up in a very small town. And it happened just about a year and a couple months before I was born.
So here, the title he's got, The Murder of Bonnie Mae Martin. That was my mom's married name. My mom's actual name is Bonnie Mae Austin, and in her headstone is Bonnie Mae Austin. Also, the road he's talking about is Main Street in Groton, New York. And if he was born a year and a couple of months after this happened, he was probably born in April of 1983, April or May, maybe June of 1983.
So my family has some interesting ties into this case also. So it's kind of like like I said, it's something that I heard about, even as I was a little kid. So, my dad's mother, my dad actually went to school with the murderer in this case.
So the murderer is a guy named Larry Martin, who was my stepdad. I'll tell the whole story at the end, but his name was Larry Martin, and he graduated from Groton, so it means his father went to Groton High School.
My dad's mother, my grandmother, liked this guy so much that she testified as a character witness for him at his trial. Now I had hoped to possibly interview, somebody involved with this case in some way to go along with the episode. But it is really hard to find people that want to talk about or even remember a murder that took place almost 40 years ago. So I figure an interesting way to really start talking about this is to hear it how I had always heard it growing up. As an adult now that knows a lot more about a lot of different things, or at least some things.
So this guy, Nick Babel, he is a freelance reporter, and he writes for, or at least he did, for a publication called the Tompkins Weekly, which is the county that Groton, New York is in. Later on, he'll talk about how he tried to find me and my brother and couldn't because we must not have a presence or whatever. And I'm literally a world famous engineer. If you Google my name, I show up everywhere. I'm all over YouTube. I'm on, I've got, I don't know, 100,000 followers globally, professionally. And, probably 20, 30, 40,000 followers on LinkedIn, 40,000 plus on YouTube, on our 4.0 Solutions channel. Not really sure how he didn't find us. The investigator, the lead investigator, my mom's murder, was a guy named Emery Guest, who later became the sheriff of Tompkins County, and he passed away, so I know he wouldn't have been able to get a hold of him. But as my stepdad was 21 years old when he murdered my mom, he was 21, 22 years old. There, a lot of the people he grew up with are in their early to mid 60s. There's a lot of people around who know about this. But he is right. Most of them don't want to talk about it because they have to come to terms with the fact that somebody that they really liked, murdered his wife in cold blood.
I realized that the narrative that I had heard about, about this murder is a pretty fucked up narrative. The murderer, and I can say murderer because, spoiler, he was convicted and served his time, and has since passed away. His name was Larry Mad Dog Martin. And yes, that is really his nickname. And yes, that is a very ironic nickname for somebody that murdered somebody. And it's kind of terrifying. But supposedly, the nickname was one of those that people give to people where it's like the opposite of the type of person they are. Like calling a really fat guy slim, or a really small guy, or a really short guy, Big Mike, something like that.
So the reason Larry's nickname was Mad Dog was because of the way he looked. He was really tall and very skinny, and he had really bushy dark hair, and he had a big, huge bushy beard that he didn't trim. And so he looked like a mad dog. I remember him as very quiet and soft-spoken. I don't remember him as... I don't have a lot of memories of him. Him and my mom got married in October of 81, and then he killed her in February of 82. I don't have a lot of memories. I have one distinct memory where we were driving through Groton I'm assuming it's Larry's car, and we were talking about, we were going to buy some house and have horses on it. And, and I don't remember if this was before or after my mom and Larry got married. But I don't remember him as being like overly emotive or anything like that. But his nickname did come from the fact that he looked the part. What's really funny is, when my mom and Larry got married, at their wedding, they wore T-shirts that said Mad Dog, and then she wore a T-shirt that said Mrs. Mad Dog.
So Larry Martin was somewhere between 6'2" and 6'4", depending on the news articles about him. He was a very tall guy. He was described by many as being a giant teddy bear. He had a calm, introspective demeanor. He was described as being quiet. The nickname Mad Dog was given to him when he was on the high school football team. I guess there was a TV show or a movie back then, and one of the characters' name on the TV show or the movie was Larry Martin, and they called the character Mad Dog. So it kind of stuck on him, so they called him Mad Dog. Supposedly, it didn't have anything to do with how he was, but then he did end up murdering somebody, so I don't know. So, Larry graduated high school and began working on local farms. He enjoyed hard work and the farm life. When he was 24 years old, he had met an older woman, Bonnie Mae Austin, and they were married fairly quickly from everything that I read. Bonnie was 30 years old at the time and had 2 children from a previous relationship, from previous relationships. Possible marriages, that's unclear.
So my mom had 4 sons. She was married right out of high school. She went to Moravia, which is right next door to Groton. She was born in 51, June 25th of 1951. She had just turned 30 when she and Larry got married. They met each other early in the summer of 81, and they got married in the fall. So they were probably together for 4 or 5 months. My mom was married out of high school. She had my older brother, Bobby, who lives in Florida, and he has been, he's spent a career in the Air Force, married, and I think he has 3 daughters. He is the only one of my siblings I've never met. His father was a guy named Mike from Moravia, which was the neighboring town. I did interesting story about Mike. I played varsity basketball for Lansing, which is the neighboring town to Groton. And my senior year in the Christmas tournament, they heard my name during the game, and my older brother's dad, he came to the Christmas tournament the following year, hoping I would be there my freshman year in college. And I was, and I met him and his new wife, Vicky, and they had wanted me to talk to my brother to kind of, tell him about his mom and stuff, because he never had any relationship with our mom. And that just never came to fruition. So she was married out of high school, had a son. Things didn't work out with her and her first husband, Mike. Not sure why things didn't work out. I can tell that my mom she had a strong personality. She was very, she marched to the beat of her own drum. Like a lot of what she really loved, like the things that I remember she would do in her downtime, she'd put her headphones on and she'd sit on the couch and she'd be listening to whatever music. Crystal Gale was like one of her favorite artists. Queen, she loved Queen. Like the music, Total Eclipse of the Heart, Don't You Make My Brown Eyes Blue, like that, Another One Bites the Dust, that music from 79, 80, 81, that's the music of the last few years with my mom. My mom used to sit on the couch, put her headphones on, plug them into the stereo, and she would rock back and forth while she listened to the music. She was also really known, like she loved to roller skate. Here in Dallas, where I live now, this is where all my memories of my mom are. We used to go to this park, Bachman Lake Park, which is just north of Love Field. And my mom we used to roller skate. She'd wear those headsets, the radio headsets, and roller skate. She loved to dance. She played the spoons. She was really known for playing the spoons. But the thing that I really remember her the most was we used to go to her, like her surrogate mom's house. Her name was Marita. Marita actually owned the bar and restaurant that my mom ran, that she was killed in upstairs. That's the whole reason we moved from Texas back to New York, was so that my mom could help Marita run this bar and restaurant. Marita had bought the place. She didn't have anyone to run it. Marita was kind of like my mom's surrogate mother, asked her to come back and help run the place. And my mom lived upstairs with me and my brother. And then she met Larry, and Larry's the only the only person I ever even remember that came there. Anyway, so my mom was married. she was married 3 times. Larry was her third husband. She was married to Mike. Then things didn't work out. My mom went to San Diego to see her sister. She met my father. Had just gotten out of the Navy. He was a musician in South Carolina. She went back to South Carolina. She got pregnant with me. Things didn't work out with them, mostly because of him. And she went back to New York. And there was the guy who ultimately became my adopted father, the guy who raised me. His name is Jerry. He was like the big stud at Moravia. He was 4 years older than my mom. When she came back, he had also come back from Vietnam, and they got together, and they were together a couple of years. He was there when I was born. He was in the delivery room when I was born, and then she got pregnant with my brother. And then I think a year after my brother, when my brother was like a year old, they split up. My mom took us to Jersey, and that's where she met her second husband, Charlie. She got married to Charlie. She had my son, my brother Michael, my youngest brother. And then I like Charlie, but I just have to tell it like it is. Charlie was really abusive. And, I remember a whole, it's weird to say that like he's a good guy, even though he beat my mom. But I think they were just from a different time. And, but I remember him just like literally beating the shit out of my mom in the kitchen and hitting her over the head with a high chair, and I literally, I'm probably 4 years old. It's one of my earliest memories. And my brother Jerry is, running around in the living room, and my little brother Michael is with the babysitter on the couch. The babysitter's just sitting there while my mom's getting her ass kicked. And I go into the kitchen, and I actually imagined getting a knife and stabbing Charlie. You know what I mean? My mom originally had her brother Jerry come live with us in New Jersey to kind of protect her, but it still didn't help. And so we ended up leaving in the middle of the night and went back to Dallas. I didn't know that we were going back to Dallas, but we went back to Dallas. I remember that, but I didn't know that my mom had ever been in Dallas before. And we were in Dallas for a few years. And then Marita bought the bar and restaurant, and we moved to New York so that my mom could run it. She was supposed to run it for 1 year. And the first summer we were there, she met Larry. And they got married in the fall, and then she was killed in February. So my mom was married 3 times, and she had 4 sons, 3 of which, and when she originally left Charlie in Jersey, she brought my little brother with her. But eventually she called Charlie, and Charlie came and got him. And so my mom raised me and my brother Jerry, but she didn't raise her first son, and she didn't raise her last son. And I had a chance to meet my youngest brother again, Charlie, or Michael, but I never met my oldest brother.
We will talk about the victim, Bonnie, way more extensively later, though. So this is the murder. This is how the murder was always told to me by my parents and just other people around town that remembered it or, knew stuff about it. Okay, so supposedly Bonnie was an abusive drunk who would sleep around on him constantly. They lived in an apartment above a bar that Bonnie worked at on the street. Like I said, the street I grew up on. The day she was murdered, she came home drunk and was bragging to him that she had just slept with some other men that she had met at another bar. They argued, and he pulled out a pistol and shot her in the head. Now,
all right, so that is not what happened. So my mother was pregnant. My mom always wanted a daughter. And she kept trying to have kids because she wanted to have a daughter. All right. Let me say, my mom was a free spirit. for sure. Like, and by a free spirit, I mean she had a big personality. She had a huge personality. She really did, and obviously it's partly where I got it from. But then I found out my dad was a musician, and when I found out like more about my father, my biological father, and my three brothers through my dad, one of my brothers actually works with me. It turns out I'm actually like just like my father. I used to think I got it from my mom, but my mom was not drunk. I actually saw the toxicology report when after her death from her autopsy, and she didn't have any alcohol in her system. So she was not drunk. She may have drank that day, but this was actually at a time, but I don't think she did. She was pregnant. The reason she and Larry were arguing is because Larry smoked weed and my mom didn't do drugs, which is weird because a lot of like my mom's friends, they were like the bar scene people. You know what I mean? And Larry would get high, he would smoke weed, and the day that he killed my mom, he was sent home early from the evening chores because he was hammered, because he was drunk. When he stopped me and my brother on the street, he was drunk. He stopped us at 3:00 in the afternoon. I'll tell the whole story later, but he stopped us at 3:00 in the afternoon when we got home from school, and he sent us to the babysitter's house. That's the only reason we weren't there when he killed her. Larry was abusive to my mother. Before my mom went upstairs from the bar, he killed her around 11:30, 12 o'clock at night. And around 11 o'clock, she was talking to one of her girlfriends at the bar, and she said, Larry's going to beat me up. I'm going to go upstairs and take my ass whooping. My mom was considering having an abortion because she did not want to have a baby with another guy who, wasn't going to work out. And Larry was mad about that. Where was my mom that day? She actually went to Owego. She went to Owego with her friend Pat, whose husband was in jail. And she went to the jail. She went with Pat so Pat could go visit her husband. And the issue is that my mom told Larry in the morning she was going to do that, and he didn't want her to. But she went anyway. She got back around 6:00 in the evening. She left around 11 o'clock, and they got back around 6. Larry was drunk. He drank all afternoon. He went to he worked for a farm down the road. He went to work and they sent him home because he was too drunk. He came back. He drank at the bar. He fell asleep on the bar. He went upstairs. They got into an argument, and the argument, based on what my mom was talking to her friends about in the bar, was over Larry's drug use and his drinking. Now, does Larry have a legitimate argument that, my mom shouldn't have gone with Pat, shouldn't have gone with her girlfriend that day because he said no? I mean, hell, he knew who you married. She was a free spirit. I mean, you're not, I don't remember my mom allowing people to tell her what to do. I don't remember that. But I do remember what he's describing there, that my mom would get drunk and, sleep with a bunch of people. That's not true. I lived with my mother. I know who my mom had in our house. And my mom had 2 boyfriends. Interestingly, both of their names were Larry. One was a guy named Larry who was the son of a local pig farmer. And then the other one was Larry, the guy she married. That's it. She didn't have guys at our place. What he's saying there, and I've heard this story a million times. This all comes from people, they liked Larry, you know. I don't really remember him. I just remember him as quiet, you know. My mom didn't like the way that Larry treated me and my brother. Now, I don't remember how he treated us, you know, if I'm being honest with you. But what I can tell you is this, is that Nick went on here and shot this podcast, did a public podcast about my mom. And he admits he has none of the information, but then he goes and he spreads these stories. Okay. I, on the other hand, my senior year in college, went back to New York. By the way, Larry was not 24. He was 21. The reason I know he was 21 is because his record was sealed as a minor, not as a minor, but as a young adult. Their New York State had a law where if you had committed a crime between the ages of 21 or below, the judge could seal the record. And that's what the judge did. So you cannot get it's not his trial transcripts and all this stuff. They're not public record. What I got to see was the DA's case. So when I was a senior in college, I went back to New York and I spent almost a week in all the libraries, Tompkins County Public Library, Cortland Public Library, Cayuga County Public Library. And I went through all the newspaper articles for like 18 months. Literally, I went through the microfiche, every single one, printed every article. To Nick's, I want to back Nick up here. You know, he'll probably say this later, I think. You know, the papers didn't get our names right or our ages. They got so many of the details wrong. And one of the things I learned from that research was that you cannot trust what you see in the media. You know, it's not the truth. It's a version of events. That's all it is. And oftentimes the facts are wrong, especially in the newspapers. What I did was on the last day, on the Friday of the week that I was doing this research, I was writing a paper in Abnormal Psych about me and my brother, about how we handled our mom's murder. I went to the DA's office. I went to the county clerk. The county clerk is the one who told me the record was sealed. So you couldn't go to the clerk, do a FOIA request, and get the stuff from the case. Okay, and this is 15, 16 years later when I'm doing this. This is like 98, the fall of 98. No, fall of 97. And my mom was killed in 82. It was 15 years later. So I went across the street to the DA's office. She suggested I go to the DA and see if I could see their records. And this is a Friday afternoon, like 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And the district attorney at the time was a guy named George Dentes. Now, George was not the DA when my mom got murdered. But George, I'm talking to his assistant. My brother's there with me. And George comes out. And he asks me how I can help. And by the way, George Dentes, or how he can help. George Dentes did not have a reputation for being a particularly nice guy. You know what I mean? Like, his reputation was kind of that he was a dick. But I can tell you this, he was incredible to me and my brother. He said, listen, I can't promise anything, but we have an off-site records thing. I'm going to send a runner over there and see what we've got. I'll give you a call. And he called me first thing Saturday, or he called me late Friday, 6, 7 o'clock. And he said, hey, if you can come in tomorrow morning, I'll tell you, we've got 4 boxes of evidence, transcripts, witness statements, everything. You can see everything if you want to. And I said, all right. And so I went there, and for 5 hours, he said, I walked into this conference room and there were 4 really long legal boxes full of stuff. And he hadn't seen the case himself either. He remembered it, but he had never seen the case. And he sat down, and I think he had one of his assistants with him as well. And they just started with the first box. And they just went through everything. And he decided, oh, here's something you would want to see. Yeah, he didn't show me every single piece of paper, and he made copies of anything I wanted. So there were 16 witness statements. There was Larry's confession. There was ballistics reports. It was all the police reports. It was the autopsy. It was all the crime scene photos. It was the autopsy photos. I looked at everything. Okay. My mother was not drunk. I saw her toxicology report. Okay. And my mom didn't do drugs. And what they were fighting about was the fact that she was pregnant and he was beating her and he was still getting high when he promised her he wouldn't. Okay. And here's how I know that that's probably true. Later on in life, I met one of his very close friends, this guy named Ron, who I worked with. And Ron, you know, he's the one who said to me when I worked at Cargill, I was coming up with the skip, and he was like, hey, you're Bonnie's son. You know, Larry was your stepdad, right? I'm like, yeah. And he's like, you know, I always thought he didn't do it. And I said, I assure you he did. Well, Ron ended up inviting us to like, you know, he was one of Larry's really close friends. And I can't remember, I think Larry was still alive at this time. He ended up dying. Larry died when he was 39. So he died right around the time I knew Ron, because he was 21 in 82. So he would have died in 2000. He would have died right around 2000, 2001 in his sleep at the age of 39. I'll talk about why he only served 5 years and all this stuff here, and you know, later. All of Ron's friends. I was married at the time. My ex-wife and I went to this barbecue together. Everybody was getting high. There was a bunch of people doing blow in the bathroom. I mean, it was, you know, and these are grown fucking adults. You know what I mean? And so it comported with what I had read in the witness statements about what my mom had told her friends they were fighting about. Okay. All right, here we go.
And he pulled out a pistol and shot her in the head. Now, the narrative, as I and other friends of mine had heard growing up, was that he was such a good guy and he just couldn't take the abuse anymore, so he snapped. Well, the judge or the jury, and this might not even have gone to trial from now that I'm thinking about it. He pled to, I guess, the prosecutor and stuff, and I guess it would be a judge, must have somewhat agreed that he was a good guy, because he was convicted of first-degree manslaughter, and he served only 5 to 8 years in prison for it.
All right, so here's what happened. He was sentenced to 12 to 20 years in prison. Larry confessed, okay? Larry killed my mother in cold blood. The reason he killed her was because she told him, this is what I think happened, based on what she was telling her friends downstairs in the bar before she went up there to talk to him. So part of the witness statements I read were what her girlfriends said that they had talked to my mom about. And one of the things was that she was considering, they had gotten into a fight in the morning about, she was thinking about having an abortion because they keep fighting about him smoking weed. Like, my mom partied, like she went to the bar and drank, but she didn't do drugs. And I'm not, and if I'm gonna be honest with you, I have no idea why she was so against drugs. But what I can tell you is this. My mom has 4 siblings, okay? She has 2 sisters. She had a brother, Jerry, and then she had a brother, Pete. I didn't know Pete that well. I only met him once or twice in Texas. But my Uncle Jerry, my Aunt Carol, and my Aunt Kelly, who are my mom's siblings, they are all also anti-drug. So I'm not sure what it is about their family, but they were like seriously anti-drug, all of them. So I don't know why. What I do know is that my mom had a really weird childhood. She grew up like in Sempronius, which is outside of Moravia. It's in the Moravia School District. All 4 of her closest siblings, Jerry, Carol, and Kelly, and my mom, they all moved out of the house by the time they were 13. The way that my mom met Marita, the one who owned the bar, the one who had my mom move up here to help run the bar, my mom didn't help run the bar. She did run the bar. My mom was the one who was responsible. She handled the staff. She handled the bank deposits. Part of what happened after Larry killed my mom was he went downstairs. He took my mom's keys and he broke into the bar and he stole the night deposit that my mom was supposed to go back down and get in the morning and take care of. My mom moved in with Marita when my mom was 13. That's how Marita became like a surrogate mother to her. We used to go to Marita's house all the time. I was really close with Marita's daughter, Allison, she was a little older than me, and she used to watch me and my brother Jerry, and she was a couple of years older, and we kept a close relationship for many years until she got married. In fact, one of my ex-wives and one of our very first dates was on July 5th or July 4th of the year we started dating, and it was Allison's wedding. My mom used to, play the organ at Marita's house and play When the Saints Go Marching In, and, all these different songs. Like I learned how to play When the Saints Go Marching In on the organ because my mom taught me how to play it. What he's saying here is not what it is this is all the speculation. This is all the stuff that Larry's friends said. It's all the stuff they said, but none of this is true. That's not why they were fighting, and my mom was not abusive to him. First off, my mom was like 5'3", and she weighed like 100 pounds. And Larry was 6'4", and he weighed 190 something. Okay, first off, I don't know if okay, that's a foot, and it's 13 inches difference. Okay. Larry is the one who was beating my mother. My mother was saying, I'm going upstairs to take my beating. That's what she said. And everybody knew that he beat her. Like, everyone knew she was in an abusive relationship. They all knew. Everybody who wrote statements said they knew. But that was at a time in 81, 82 where that was kind of normal. It was normal for a guy to smack his wife around. And I don't know, I could tell you that my dad who raised me, he never raised a hand to my mom. He never even raised his voice to my mother, my adopted mother growing up. Like, I know he never laid a hand on a woman, but I know that my stepdad, Charlie, did. He beat the shit out of my mom. And Larry beat the shit out of my mom. And I don't know what my mom's first husband did, but I seriously doubt, I met him, I seriously doubt he was beating my mom. Why? No, the prosecutor did not side with Larry. Here, I read the letter from the prosecutor as to why they accepted the plea deal. Here are the reasons. Larry confessed. The only witnesses that could prove intent were me and my brother. The reason why was because Larry stopped us on the street on our way home from school and sent us to the babysitter for that night. He told us to go to the babysitter. He knew in the middle of the day he was going to kill my mom. That's what the prosecution's theory was. We were the only ones who could testify that he sent us to the babysitter's house and that he had never done that ever before. Okay? Larry confessed. In his confession, he said that he tried to scare her. He'd never mentioned that he was abused in his confession. He never mentioned that he just snapped. What he said was that they had gotten into a fight and that she said she was going to have an abortion and that she wouldn't come to bed with him. She was going to sleep on the couch, and he got angry and he wanted to scare her. So he went out. My mom was asleep on this couch. He sat on the other couch. He had just bought a pistol within like the last 8 or 10 days. He had planned this. And he sat down and he pointed the gun at her and he shot her in the head. And it entered behind, she was asleep, entered behind her ear. It came out of her nose and went into her mouth. Okay. He didn't kill her in the heat of the moment. They weren't in a battle. Okay. He then got up, walked over and put the gun against her temple and fired. And the bullet went in her right temple and out the left. And the bullet landed right here. The reason you know that is there was stippling on the temple, and in the ballistics report, the shell casing had ejected next to the TV, and then the second shell casing was at her feet. And they actually did a test to show where the shell would land based on these shots. And so they knew that he had done it. He had intentionally killed her. Here's the problem. My brother and I were the only ones who could testify that he had sent us to the babysitter. Larry had never spoken to the babysitter. The babysitter didn't know we were coming. And she wrote in her statement, pretrial statement, that Bonnie, neither Bonnie nor Larry ever talked to her. We just showed up and said, Larry told us to come to come here. Okay. I specifically remember Larry telling us. He knelt right in front of me and, he was fucking drunk. I could see it. And he smelled like booze. And he got bail. He got bailed out by, I think, the farmer that he worked for ended up bailing him out. And he got into a motorcycle accident over the summer while he was out on bail. And from that moment forward, he said he didn't remember anything. Clearly, he was lying. His lawyer was a guy named Bill Sullivan, who was formerly the district attorney in Tompkins County. Bill is the one who came up with this whole, Bonnie was beating, and I have a whole different fucking discussion about Bill Sullivan. I knew Bill growing up. His sister Seal was really close friends with my godmother. I had fucking Thanksgiving dinner at Bill's house. He never mentioned that he defended the guy who killed my mom. And when I found out in college, I literally called him and I'm like, Bill, you didn't think I was going to find out? You didn't think I was going to find out you said all that fucked up shit about my mom? Like, clearly Bill Sullivan is the one who made up this story, because Larry never mentioned any of this in his confession. Nothing. He never said she was abusive. He never said anything like that. Here's why they took the plea deal. 2 reasons. Okay. And I read the letter from the district attorney. She did not want to take the deal. Well, she was the ADA and then the DA was a guy. She did not want to take the deal. She said, we feel compelled. Bill, they weren't going to plead guilty to anything above manslaughter. And this is what Bill Sullivan's calculation was. And he even said this in court. Nobody is coming to defend her. Her family's not here. No one's here to defend her. But Larry had all these people there in support of him. All these people who remembered him. Okay. They said 2 things. Number 1, my new parents, my adopted mother, did not want me or my brother to testify. They were afraid that it was going to dredge up bad memories for us. This is a year later. So she writes 3 things. Number 1, the defendant now says is he can't remember anything about that case. So we're not going to be able to question him about his confession, because their position is he was in an accident. He doesn't remember anything. Okay. Number 2, the New York State Appellate Court has been incredibly strict on overturning cases where the conviction hinges solely on a confession. Okay, now it was lots of physical evidence, like the gun. They know the gun that killed her. The shells. They know. He placed the gun underneath the seat of the car that he parked next to at the Cortland Police Department. That lady ended up turning the gun in. They had physical evidence, but she was like, "We're worried that if we go to trial and we get a conviction, it'll get overturned." Okay, that was number 2. That me and my brother. And, we couldn't testify. And number 3 was how strict the state was. So they agreed to 2 counts of second-degree manslaughter because my mom was pregnant. Okay, it wasn't 1 count of first-degree manslaughter. It was 2 counts of second-degree manslaughter. And he agreed to 12 to 20 years in prison. That's what he pled guilty to. He got 12 to 20. He went to Attica. Okay, he was imprisoned in Attica. And he was paroled after 5 years based on New York State's parole rules at that time. He got out just after 5 years. By the time I was 12. He remarried, lived in the middle of nowhere like a hermit out near Lake Como, and he died in his sleep at the age of 39. Larry Martin was not a victim. He was not a fucking victim. He chose to marry my mother. And then he chose to live the way he did. The day he killed my mother, he got sent home from work because he went to work drunk. The reason my mom was upset with him was because he wouldn't stop smoking weed. And she was like, I'm going to have an abortion. And that's what he was mad about. He was mad that she said she was going to have an abortion. And she was mad, and he was mad that she wouldn't come to bed with him. That's why he killed her. And that's also based on his confession. He even said she threatened to have an abortion.
Which we'll get to later, but that's insane for a murder. Now with that over,
I'm Amanda,
I'm Melissa.
and we're Dark and Twisties. Follow us on.
that was the narrative that I'd heard, and that was the broad.
I don't know what that was, but some commercial.
That was the narrative that I'd heard, and that was the broad story. So I can get into the details of the case. I researched it. It turns out there's a lot more going on than I had been told. Putting together circumstances and evidence, it's hard to believe that this guy did such little time, and also hard to believe how little the victim's life was valued, by the justice system or even the community, really.
Really, the community, for sure. I mean, what's crazy is me and my brother were there. Like we only moved to the next town over when I got adopted. His dad, my brother's dad, lived in the next town over. Let me caveat here. A lot of people wonder why I'm so normal or whatever. And obviously my adopted parents played a huge role in it. My dad, who I call my dad, is my brother's dad, the one who raised me. He turned me into the man I am. He turned me into the man that my brother Chuck is, my sister Rachel is, the woman my sister Rachel is, and the woman my sister Tanya is. He was a rock in our lives. He raised 4 kids that weren't his. He was a ball butt. He was a hard ass, don't get me wrong. And he was a man's man, baby boomer, Vietnam, the whole. But my father, I learned so many lessons from my dad. And my dad protected us. He protected me and my brother from everything. And, and there's some story, there was like a band that did a fundraiser on Larry's behalf, and my father wasn't happy about it. And, he did something about it. And, it was really the community. What happened was, in a small community, my mom was dead and he wasn't. They were both from the community, and no one wanted to admit that someone they cared about was capable of this. And so they created delusion in their head. And there was no one there. Even Marita, who didn't like it, they didn't speak up about it. Pat, who was the babysitter, she didn't like it, but she didn't speak up about it, because otherwise she would have had to deal with Larry's friends. Now, when I came across Larry's buddy Ron later in life, Ron was pretty similar to Larry, 6'4", big dude. He was a total douche, big dick. And I just let him fucking have it. Both barrels. Both barrels. I made him look stupid, and, I have always spoken up for my mother, and there's nobody on this earth who knows this case better than I do. Nobody. And as far as I know, no one else has ever looked at the case file. I'm the only one who's ever, and I have copies of all this stuff in a file downstairs. I've got the ballistics report. In fact, I think I did a blog post one time on the ballistics report, but talking about how fucked up this is. To Nick's point here, the DA didn't want to accept the deal. And the judge was very reluctant to accept the deal. The judge accepted the deal reluctantly. That's why that the deal took place more than a year after the murder, was because they were trying to figure out a way to take it to trial, and my adopted mother was adamant me and my brother couldn't testify. And, just so we're clear, when I found that out, I was pissed. I didn't even talk to my adopted mom. I didn't even tell her why I didn't talk to her. And then she fucking died a handful of years later. And I had to give, my siblings asked if I would give the eulogy at her funeral. And I did, and I apologized. And I said, I hadn't even talked to her in years. I had held a grudge because of this. And that was the last time I've ever held a grudge in my life. But my adopted mom didn't want us to testify. And that was reason number one in the DA's list when they submitted it to the judge, why they were recommending that the court approve the plea deal. The three reasons they had there. There was nothing in their explanation about mitigating circumstances. Nothing. There was nothing in there that the DA was sympathetic to Mr. Martin. Nothing. In fact, she said, flat out, they said he killed Bonnie in cold blood. And I assure you, he killed her in cold blood and he planned it. The only thing I don't know for certain is that he planned it. But I know for certain he killed her in cold blood. And there is very strong circumstantial evidence that he planned it. He bought the gun a week before he sent me and my brother home that day. And then obviously he lied to his friends about why he did it. He changed his story about why he did it a million times. He never said anything about abuse in his confession.
So let's start over. This time with research and facts and without biases of friendships. So Bonnie Austin and Larry Martin were married on Halloween in 1981. Bonnie Mae Martin was a blonde bartender at the Mill Race Bar on Hugo Street in Groton, New York. The couple lived in an apartment above the bar with Bonnie's two young sons, Jerry and Walker. Their ages are listed as either 9 and 7 or 8 and 7, depending on the article that I read.
I was 7 when my mom was killed, and my brother was 5. I was 7 and my brother was 6. He was born in 1975, and he had turned 6 in 1981, in October of 81. I was 7, he was 6, and I turned 8 years old 2 months after my mom died.
So let's talk about Bonnie. She was 30 years old, like I said, blonde, seemingly very attractive.
She was a brunette, and she was a knockout. I mean, look at me.
She was known to rollerblade around town listening to music. She had 2 boys with 2 different men, and may have been married at least once before, but I could not find any, concrete specifics on that.
Married 3 times, 4 sons. I'm the only bastard child.
As I stated earlier, she was a bartender, but she had aspirations of owning her own bar.
So what my mom actually did was she opened restaurants. That's what she did in Dallas. And and she went to New York to work at to get the Mill Race off the ground. Marita had recently bought it, and she wanted to make it a restaurant. It was a bar, and she wanted to use the kitchen. And so they split the bar. There was one side that was a restaurant side, and the other side was a bar side. And the reason my mom was there, the reason we moved from Dallas to New York, was so that my mom could help Marita do that.
According to reports, she was very close to making this a reality. This seems to be part of a possible motive for her murder. Bonnie's younger son, Walter, had been hit by a car and injured, so she had received a settlement of $40,000.
So it wasn't me who got hit by a car. It was my brother, Jerry, and it was the previous summer. And it was when we were walking back from Sykes Park, which was the community pool. Jerry ran across the street in a crosswalk, and this lady, Penny, hit him right in front of me. I watched him flip up over, land on top of the car, and fall behind the car. And the settlement was $42,000. And that settlement was supposed to come in very, very soon. And I know that Larry wanted to buy a farm, and my mom wanted to, I'm fairly certain what my mom wanted to do was buy the cobblestone, which was in Locke and she, you know, and I remember going there and we like looked at the kitchen and the fryers and all that kind of stuff that was there. I remember us doing that over the wintertime. But that wasn't the reason that wasn't the motive.
Bonnie planned on using that money to buy a bar in the neighboring town of Moravia, New York. According to friends and coworkers, she was even in the process of picking out furniture and talking about how she wanted the bar to look. However, her husband, Larry, did not approve of this and had other plans for that money. He wanted to buy a farm in the area and work on the farm while she raised the children. According to friends, she laughed at this and dismissed any idea of buying a farm. The day she was murdered, which I will go over more later, she had gone out with a female friend.
So she did not laugh out. When I told you earlier, but we had drove around and Larry said, you know, we were going to buy a house and horses, and my mom did not laugh at that idea. We talked about that idea. By the way, it's one of the only memories I have of Larry was my mom entertained that idea. I mean, I was there when she did it. So she definitely didn't, she definitely did not dismiss it. But yes, she was not going to buy a farm. But the issue with the farm was she wasn't, I mean, literally the day that Larry killed my mom, he got sent home because he had gone to work to do chores at this dairy farm and he was hammered and he got sent home. And apparently that was a recurring problem. And the reason I know that is because the farmer he worked for, I can't remember the guy's name, I read his statement. He had talked about how this had been a problem in the past but that he liked Larry.
And she told the friend that day that she was planning on, wasn't super clear, but either meeting with the seller of the bar in Moravia or making an offer soon within the next week or two.
I don't think it was. It could have been in Moravia, and that would have made it like Forelli's, or you know, there was a bar called Forelli's in Moravia. I'm pretty sure it was the Cobblestone, and the Cobblestone is actually in Locke, which is a town between Groton and Moravia.
One thing that friends and non-friends both agreed on, from everything that I read, was that Bonnie loved to drink. The day she was murdered, she had been drinking while she was out with her friend. And according to Larry, they both drank and argued before the shooting.
So my mother, I saw her toxicology report. Her blood alcohol content was 0. So that is not true. And since we know that she was killed between 11:30 and 1 o'clock in the morning. And the reason I know that is because Larry went to a friend's house after he killed my mom, and he got to their house at 1:30. And then he was drunk. He passed out on the couch. His buddy and his wife went to bed. Larry woke up sometime in the middle of the night, and he left. And then he started driving to Florida. So when my mom got killed, was sometime between 11:30 at night and 1 o'clock in the morning. She went upstairs around 11:30. She was not drunk. I mean, that's just not true. She was pregnant. Now, at that time, people drank when they were pregnant all the time. I don't think fetal alcohol syndrome was a thing back then, because I seem to remember like pregnant people smoking and drinking, you know, in the early 80s. So, but she was not drunk. Larry, on the other hand, was hammered. He passed out on the bar. He was drinking Fleischmann and Coke all day, and he had gone to work and got sent home from work because he was drunk, and he passed out on the bar. And a lot of people were saying, the witnesses were saying, that he would like wake up and, you know, and they never kicked him out. Maybe they didn't do that back then.
So hopefully this isn't burying the lead, but there was another big thing about Bonnie and Larry's marriage and Bonnie's condition. Bonnie was 2 months pregnant when she was murdered. There's a lot to digest with that. For one, he not only murdered his wife, but he murdered his unborn child. Secondly, was this part of his motive? The statistics still in 2022 show that the leading cause of death for a pregnant woman is murder. That's now. 1982 seems like it would probably be even worse. This also brings up another interesting point. It seems from all accounts that I've read and from hearing it from people that they both knew, that she was pregnant.
Not only did they know she was pregnant, they were fighting about it. She was telling him she was going to have an abortion because he wouldn't stop smoking weed. And one of the witness statements was she had an issue with the fact that he was going to beat her up when she went upstairs, and she's pregnant.
Given that fact, it is kind of odd that everyone agrees she was drinking heavily at the time, especially on that day. Now, while her husband, the murderer, is an unreliable narrator for her drinking that day because, he was the one with her when he killed her. But her friend, who she'd gone out with earlier, said they'd been drinking. So I'm not victim shaming at all. In 1982, I guess drinking while pregnant was not as much of a taboo as it is now.
I would not. I can say this. My mom did not drink at home. Like, she didn't drink at home. Like, she didn't have beer in the fridge or anything like that. My mom worked in a bar, and I saw her drink draft beer. That's the only thing I ever saw her drink. What I will say is, if she drank during the day, that would not surprise me. Based on what I remember about that time, she did not go to... That day, she went to a WeGo with her girlfriend so her girlfriend could go visit her husband in jail. That's where she was. So the argument that she went to a bar and cheated on Larry, that's what she was doing that day is not true. She went to a WeGo with this lady, I think her name was Pat, to go visit her husband in jail. That's what she did that day. Now, did they stop at a bar on the way back? Maybe. But what I do know is I saw my mom's toxicology report from her autopsy, and her blood alcohol content was 0.
So let's now talk about the day of the murder. According to Larry, he woke up early and went to his job at a local farm. His wife, Bonnie, stated that she would be working that day at the bar and would be there when he got home. Sometime early in the day, after Larry left, Bonnie left the bar with a female friend, and they went out of town. They went bowling. They played pool with some guys they met. There was drinking involved. Whether this went any further than, bowling and playing pool with some guys, that is pure conjecture.
I don't know. I would be very interested if I ever do get a chance to talk to Nick. I would love to know where he got that. I don't ever remember reading that in a newspaper article, and it certainly is not in any of the witness statements. What is in the witness statement is from, and I think her name is Pat. Pat is the one who says what they did. And if I remember it correctly, and I can go look at the statements, but here's what happened in that morning. My mom was home when Larry got back from work. My mom said to Larry that she needed him to do X, Y, and Z in the apartment, and she had to go do the bank run for the bar. She had to go take the previous night's deposit and go deposit it in the bank. She went downstairs. She went and did the deposit. She comes back, and she'd run into Pat, and Pat had asked her if she would be willing to go to WeGo with her. She didn't want to go to the jail and visit her husband alone. And my mom said she was going to go. Larry told her she couldn't go, and she went anyway. Like I said, she did not tell my mom what to do. Larry got drunk the remainder of the day. He was hammered. Me and my brother come home from school at 3:00 in the afternoon. He sends us to the babysitter. He drinks some more. He goes to work at 5:00. His boss sends him home. He goes back to the bar. He drinks some more. My mom gets home around 6:00 or so, and they get into a fight. And he stays in the bar drinking. My mom is there. She goes upstairs. When he goes upstairs, she comes back down, and that's when she talks to her girlfriends. And she tells her girlfriends that that Larry's pissed, that she went to a WeGo and blah, blah, blah. And she's going to go upstairs and take her beating. They go upstairs. They get into an argument. She finds out he got sent home from work, and they get into some argument. And I can only speculate that the argument is around the smoking weed and hitting her and not being responsible. How am I going to have a kid with someone who's irresponsible? My mom was no saint. I'm not saying, but what he's saying here, she didn't go bowling that day. And might she have played pool? It's absolutely possible. My mom was a pool hustler. So that's one of the things I remember about her, roller skating and playing pool. So, don't ever remember her bowling. I don't ever remember going to a bowling center with her, if I'm being honest with you. So that's definitely not true.
But some people believe that she was cheating with one of the men that morning. Who knows? As I said earlier, there was, that was one of the possible motives. So Larry, for whatever reason, decides to come home early from work. The classic husband showing up early.
That is not what happened. He got sent home from work because he was too drunk.
He arrives to find that his wife's left for the day, left the bar. She did not say where she'd be going. Larry says he's furious.
Oh, wait, hold on. This is in the morning he's talking about.
He sits down at the bar and he drinks all day. Now, when Bonnie finally returns home, there's an argument. They take it up to their apartment, which is above the bar. At this point, any of the events that take place come directly from Larry,
That isn't what happened. He passed out on the bar after he sent me and my brother, the babysitter. He's there a couple more hours. This all comes from the witness statements. My mom gets back around 6:00. He kills her 5.5 hours later. She goes upstairs. He doesn't go upstairs. He's hammered. He falls asleep on the bar, and and all the bartender and everyone's talking about it. He goes upstairs. I don't know, 10:00 I think is what they say, and my mom comes downstairs, and my mom talks to her girlfriend, and that's when she tells she talks to multiple girlfriends about what's going on and why they're fighting, and him getting high, and I need to go upstairs and take my he's pissed. I need to go upstairs and take my beating. She goes upstairs. They fight. What he says in his confession is that she threatens to have an abortion and that he won't come to bed with her. And she sleeps on the couch. And then he says, I grab my pistol out of the closet. I come out. And then he tries to minimize. I tried to scare her. He never says that he shot her. He says he doesn't remember how many times he shot her. Even though he shot her, got up, the ballistics prove this unequivocally. He shoots her once while he's sitting down, and it goes in the back of the ear, comes out of her nose, and goes into her arm. Okay, so she's asleep. And then he gets up, he walks over, and he shoots her through the temple. You don't forget that. He lied about it.
after he was arrested. So who knows if it's true or not, but
I know what
they
he
both
said.
continue drinking up in the apartment and arguing. He says she starts yelling at him and hitting him, and he gets up, gets his .32 caliber pistol, and then this is a quote from him, I believe on the day of the murder. He says, "I think I shot her once in the head, but they say there was 2 shots. I was just trying to scare her, and I must have hit her."
They tell him when he says that, so it's a tape, so they recorded his confession and then they transcribed it. So in the transcription, whenever he mumbles, it says like inaudible. They confront him and they say, "Larry, we know that's not what happened. We know that you were sitting when you shot her, and we know that you got up and you shot her again." And then he acknowledges. He's like, I don't remember that. Now, let me say he was hammered. I mean, if he was passed out on the bar at 8 or 9 o'clock at night and he kills her at 11:30, this is 2.5 hours. I mean, his blood alcohol has got to be, even when he went to his buddy's house at 1 o'clock in the morning after he robbed the bar and took the money out of the bar and everything, his buddy said he was hammered. So yeah, it's possible he doesn't remember clearly, but there's no way you shoot someone in the head, get up and shoot them again to make sure they're dead. You don't remember you shot them twice.
So she was in fact shot twice in the head. In all likelihood, she was dead immediately. So now
Here's how we know she was dead immediately. She never moved. So the trajectory, the way they found her body, her head was still in the same position it was when he shot her. Like they did one of those little stick things, and her head was still in the perfect position where the bullet would come in behind the back of her ear, come out of her nose, and go into her left forearm, the way that she was laying. Her head was still tilted to the side. And then when he shot her, he got up and he shot her through the temple, and the bullet went straight through. Her head was tilted to the side, so he didn't have to hold the gun down parallel to the ground. He was able to shoot down through her temple.
for another awful fact that did not seem to be, taken into consideration by the judge or the attorneys. Bonnie's 2 young sons were dropped off home after spending the night at a friend's house. They were the ones that discovered their mother's body.
All right, so we did not get dropped off. We walked home. Our babysitter lived down Main Street directly across from the grocery store. So this is probably, 800 meters. It's less than a half a mile, and it's straight down a sidewalk. So we walked to the babysitter's house, and then we walked home in the morning, and it was probably 7 a.m. when we went home. Our babysitter sent us home. We went home, and we were in the room with her for 45 minutes. He covered her up with a sheet. Here's the other thing. He covered her up with a sheet and covered up her face. And what I want you to look up is what that behavior signifies. Okay, so when you kill someone when you kill someone close to you, oftentimes you'll cover their face up so they can't look at you. My mom's eyes were open. When I found her, her eyes were open. And she had dried blood coming out of her nose and her mouth, and her eyes were all cloudy, and she was looking like she looked right at me. It fucked me up for years, actually. I would see it in my sleep, her clouded eyes looking right at me, But he knew he had killed her. He tried to say in his confession he didn't know she was dead. He covered her up with a sheet. They even covered her face up. And they tried to say, Larry, we know that's not true. He kept trying to minimize what he did.
That is super fucked up. Side note, I did try to look up both of them, to see what was going on, just out of curiosity. But there's almost no current information on either of them. either they have changed their names, passed away, they have no online presence at all. I really did look for them.
All right, so in Nick's defense, the newspaper did get our names, got my name wrong, but they got Jerry's name right. Okay, so it was Jerry Ostrander. Okay, if you Google Jerry Ostrander, you are going to find one of two people. You are going to find my brother and all of his crimes, and you're going to find my dad and the fact that my dad's a Hall of Fame trap shooter in New York State, and he's the one who raised us. Okay, my name. There was one newspaper article that called me Walter, and he must be looking at Cortland. One of them kept calling me Walter. But they still had my last name, Walter Reynolds. But the Ithaca Journal, which is the Tompkins County paper, they got my name right. They just got our ages wrong. And there was a couple of times where they had my name as like Walker Ostrander. Okay, so in his defense, it may have been hard to find me. But if you Google Walker Reynolds, I'm a world famous engineer. Okay, you're gonna find me. Okay, and I assure you, I'm not even remotely close to dead. I can bench press 500 fucking pounds. I can squat 500 pounds, and I can deadlift 500 pounds. I am far from dead. Okay, but I'm gonna give Nick some grace here. Okay, I'm gonna give him some grace because if he was operating on like what the newspapers wrote about us, it's more forgivable.
So, not sure. I mean, I guess if that happens to you, who knows how your life's going to go after that. So,
I will say this. Nick and I DM'd back and forth. In fact, I'm going to read the DMs to you. So I've got one DM exchange. Okay? One. So I messaged him on my Facebook because I don't use Facebook. I went to Facebook and found him. And this is exactly what I said to him. Okay? Nick, my name is Walker Reynolds, and I'm Bonnie Austin's son. You know her as Bonnie Mae Martin. You did a podcast about her in 2022 and repeated a lot of rumors that are not true. Moreover, my brothers and I are very much alive, and I am a public figure. A simple Google search of Walker Reynolds, New York or Texas, and I'll be the number one hit. I'd like to have a call with you to set the record straight about the things you said in the podcast. For what it's worth, my team forwarded the link to me via my sister. I listened yesterday and was honestly appalled. No ill will, but I would like to set the record straight. And then he said, sorry, I'm just seeing your message. I talked to your brother on here the other night. I'm assuming it was my brother, Jerry. There's no way that fucking went great because my brother would eviscerate him. I mean, if my brother ever gets if my brother listened to this podcast and my brother ever gets his hands on Nick, I feel sorry for him. I mean, so my job is to make sure Jerry never runs into Nick because that'll be ugly. That'd be really ugly. I've spent my whole life trying to get people to not call my brother a son of a bitch. You call my brother a son of a bitch and he's going to take your head off. And you don't even know that it's cause he in his head, you called our mom a bitch. You know what I mean? Like, so he goes, sorry, I'm just seeing your message. I talked to your brother on here the other night. I think one of the issues I had finding you guys is that the local newspaper articles had your last name switched. I do remember that. So in his defense, I will say that as of right now, I'm no longer doing the podcast, but I may start up again in the future. And if you and your brother wanted to do a follow-up episode to set the record straight, that would be great. I'm sure this whole thing is tough to talk about. It was a tough listen as well. I understand being appalled by it. My sources were basically all the local newspapers and interviews with some family members that knew Mad Dog and remembered the case. I did want to talk to someone that knew your mother, but I hit a bunch of dead ends with people mentioned in the articles. Before I talk to you, I want to re-listen to the episode as it's been 2 years since I recorded it. I do apologize if this opened up any bad memories for your family. There's a lot of true crime podcasts, and I decided to give it an attempt with an episode about a murder I heard about growing up in Groton. I said, Nick, sounds good. I'm not on Facebook, and my team handles all of my other social media. So when you're ready to get in touch, you can text me on my personal cell. And I gave him my personal cell number. He has not used it. For what it's worth, I do want to chat with you and set the record straight. If we do it one-on-one or your podcast or mine, it doesn't matter. What does matter is that you know the facts. And my mother's name isn't compromised in the name of sympathy for Larry. He said, that's fair. I definitely don't have any sympathy for Larry. But for some reason, a lot of people who were adults at that time did and tried. And I tried to convey how I thought that was messed up. I'd love to know more about your mother as a person. The newspaper articles didn't get too much info on her personally. And that exchange was February 15th, the day before the anniversary of my mom's murder. And today's March 29th. So it's been 6 weeks. I gave the guy 6 weeks before I recorded this. And he never reached back out. He's got my personal cell number. He's got my Facebook DM. And he has not reached out. So that's why I'm doing this.
After the shooting, Larry panics, gets into his car, and starts driving south. He goes from his home down to Pennsylvania, taking 81 south. He drives for a couple of hours, but then, he kind of realizes what he did and he starts to feel guilty. He turns around and comes back to the area. He says he tries to stop at his sister's house, but she's not home. Then he turns himself into the police.
All right, what he did was he went downstairs and he robbed the bar. I think it was $300 and something. He took the cash bag that would be delivered to the bank, had the deposit slip in it and everything. He took that and he took a couple of bottles of Fleischmann's whiskey. He drove over to a buddy's house. I cannot remember the guy's name, but the guy lived in Groton. He drove over to the buddy's house. The guy was married. He was hammered. He passed out on the guy's couch. His guy and his wife went to sleep. Larry's asleep a couple more hours. He wakes up, and then he gets in his car and he starts heading south. He was on his way to Florida. He turns around some point that day, and what had happened was when they asked him, why did you turn around? He said, because he turned around right about 8 o'clock in the morning, and he said, because I realized that they were probably finding her right about that time. And he turned back around. He drove to the Cortland Police Department. And the reason he turned himself in Cortland and not in Tompkins County, which is because a friend of his was there. And he turned himself in to a police officer who was one of his friends. He said, hey, I'm here to turn myself in for Bonnie. Before he went into the police department, he took the gun, which he still had, and he placed it under the front seat, under the front driver's seat of the lady he parked next to. She was there taking care of a ticket. She finds that gun 6 weeks later, and she turns it in, and she says, I believe he put it in my car. I was parked next to him when he turned himself in because his vehicle was being impounded when I left. That's a calculated move. If you feel guilty and you're turning yourself in, why do you put the gun underneath the driver's seat of the car next to you? What he was doing was he was doing calculus in his head. He was calculating, how can I make myself look the best? That's why when he did his confession, he tried to blame my mother for her murder. He tried to say she was abusive. He was 6'4", 195 pounds. My mom was 5'3". Okay, now, granted, my mom was a pistol. But I can tell you this. I saw my mom get into one physical altercation in her whole life, and it was with another woman. And I saw her get her ass kicked by two of her partners. Okay, my mom had a history of being in violent relationships. Okay, and I don't know if that was just par for the course for that time. I just don't know. You know what I mean? But Larry realized he was never going to be able to get away. And he just... I don't know if Larry was a bad person. I'm going to shoot a video on characters, who you are when no one's watching. Only you and God know what your character are. I mean, the rest of us can kind of figure it out over time. I don't have enough data on Larry. I know Larry never got in trouble before that, never any serious trouble, and he never got in any serious trouble after he got out of prison. I know he lived a very secluded life, and he lived out in the middle of nowhere in Lake Como, and he died in his sleep at 39 years old. I saw him 2 times after he killed my mom. I saw him once the summer after he killed her. He was out on bail. My new family took us to a barbecue in Groton at a buddy of my dad's who he played softball with. It was a big, huge summer barbecue. I think it was 4th of July. There was a gas station called the Busy Bee in Groton. We went across Main Street to the Busy Bee, and Larry was parked in a car. He was in the passenger seat of a car parked at the gas pump. And that was the first time I saw him. The next time I saw him, I was 22 or 23 years old. This is before I wrote my paper, but seeing him is what made me want to write this paper. It was 6 months before I did the research. I was back in New York, and I was bar hopping with a friend. Okay, so I had, actually, it's actually my buddy's wife, one of my best friends. We all worked together, and she was kind of like our home girl. And like my last night in town, she and I would always go bar hopping. We'd go to Moravia, and we'd go and have one drink at like the bars that our parents used to go hang out at. We'd go pop, 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 pop. We started at the Betty Blue. Anyway, we'd go to the Cobblestone, the bar that I thought my mom was going to own, and he walked in. Now, he did not recognize me. I recognized him immediately. And somebody said, "Hey, Mad Dog." And then she knew immediately. And she's like, "Do you want to get out of here?" And I said, "No, I want to take it in for 3 or 4 minutes." And I just stood there and I breathed and then I left. And that's the only time I ever saw him. He looked like he had lived a hard life at that time. And he died, he was probably 36 at that time. And he died shortly after that.
Now, while he was out on bail, and yes, you could get bail for manslaughter and murder back then, I guess.
He was charged with two counts of second degree murder, but he pled to 2 counts of second degree manslaughter.
He got into a bad motorcycle accident. After this accident, he conveniently forgets what happened on the day of the murder. This is actually something his attorney uses in court.
Yep.
Now,
You got that
he
right.
must have made at least that one statement to the press the day he was arrested. But supposedly after this motorcycle accident, he doesn't remember. So, convenient. He eventually pleads guilty to first-degree manslaughter. Larry is sentenced to 5 to 15 years in prison.
It's 12 to 20, and it was 2 counts of second degree.
I read and heard 2 different stories about the amount of time he served. But it was as little as the minimum 5 years.
He did 5.
And at most 8 years.
He did 5 years.
My dad said that when he got out, he moved down south, I believe, to Georgia or Texas. I'm not totally sure. And he died fairly young, maybe in his late 40s, early 50s.
He died at the age of 39 in his sleep in Lake Como, which is outside of Moravia.
So that's as much as I know about really what became of him. So now I'm going to talk about the rumors and innuendo that followed this case. None of these things are remotely confirmed. Some are probably half-truths. Most of it's probably bullshit. This is the stuff, though, a lot of it anyways, that I had heard as a kid about this woman and about the murder. And, I even asked some people recently and heard a couple of these, theories and different things. So first, she was supposedly abusive to him, both physically and mentally. She was a mean drunk that often would hit him and humiliate him. she had been having multiple affairs, and the day she was murdered, she told him she had slept around on him that morning when she left the bar.
So there is no evidence of that in any of the statements. That there were 16 witness statements in the prosecution's file. There was no evidence of that. No one ever mentioned that they both beat each other. What they did say was that he beat her, that he was physically violent with her. Emotionally abusive. I can tell you that. I mean, is it outside the realm of possibility that like my mom could have, maybe, my mom was a pistol, like, and by a pistol, I mean, there's two types of people in this world. There are those who get backed into a corner and they cover up and they, give up. And there are those who come out swinging. My mom was one who comes out swinging. Okay. Never saw my mom hit anybody. Or I saw her get into a fight one time with a woman, but that was because a woman attacked her. I mean, I was there. I saw it happen. She tried to attack her with a crowbar. And that was her first boyfriend, Larry. It was his ex-girlfriend. While they were together, she came and like beat up his car with a crowbar, his truck, and then like went after my mom, and my mom beat her up. Never saw my mom never raised her hand to me. She never raised her hand to my brother. And I don't remember my mom ever being drunk. So like when he says she was a mean drunk, I have no recollection of my mom ever being drunk. I have recollections of my mom picking us up from a babysitter after she went out. Let's say she picks us up at midnight or something from the babysitter's house. And I don't remember her. Maybe she had some drinks, but I don't remember her being like shit-faced, stumbling, slurring, angry. I don't have a single memory of any of that. When we would do barbecues and stuff like that, we would do like big family events at Marita's house. She lived in a big, like horse farm, big 100-acre horse farm. And she lived in a big farmhouse, and they had this like big bar and stuff. My mom drank beer. She drank draft beer, but I don't remember her drinking a lot. And I know she never drank. I never saw her drinking at home. But I don't want to just default to, my mom was a saint, and but what he's talking about here, there's no evidence, any of that. There's nothing in any of the statements, and there's nothing in my experience that holds water. And, the cheating thing. I remember my mom, while we were in New York with two people. She had her boyfriend, Larry, and then her husband, Larry. That's it. She didn't have people coming over to our house. I don't ever remember somebody coming to our place. I heard these rumors all the time. I heard them. My father told me it wasn't true when I asked him. But, isn't my dad going to protect my feelings? You know what I mean? But what he told me was that I asked him, what happened between you and my mom? Why didn't you guys not work out? And he said, your mother was always searching for something she never found. That's what he said. And the older I am, the more I see that in my own dating life after divorce. The number of women who are looking for things that they never find.
Another rumor was that her panties were pulled down and rape was involved.
There was no, they did a rape kit. One of the things that really fucked me up was there were two photos that I saw I wish I hadn't saw. One was of her head cut open. So they had cut her skull open and they had stuck the sticks through her brain, so they didn't remove the brain. And I saw a photo of my mom like on a autopsy table with her skull removed and the sticks through her head, like showing the bullet trajectory. And then the other one was of the rape kit. I didn't know this, but when they do a rape kit, they take a photo of the private parts, and I saw that. And I read the rape kit. It was negative.
Did not find this anywhere where it was written up, and he was not charged with any rape or anything like that. But people that
they had slept together in the morning, and there was the remnants of his, like the idea that she was cheating on him with these other guys or whatever is not true. There was no evidence of that. They had sex in the morning, and the only and what they found when they looked at the remnants, it was his blood type.
Had heard this rumor.
One partner.
Some think that he was so drunk that he thought he had killed her, but it was one of the men that she had slept with, hence the rape rumor or something like that. It seems pretty far-fetched and just people saying shit,
Why would you say this? You know what I mean, Nick? Come on, man. It's irresponsible to do this. Like, I make a lot of, I do my own podcast. This, what we do here on Adversity and Success, it's tiny. It's for my kids. It's for, I do podcasts that get 10,000, 20,000, 30,000. I have a couple of podcast episodes on 4.0 Solutions that have over 150,000 listens. I call people out all the time, and I make sure that I've got 3 sources, 3 pieces of corroboration for any of the gray area stuff. Why you would ever say this? You know what I mean? It's like, come on, dude.
On the other end of the spectrum, there was another rumor that he was involved with her shooting. He had hired a friend to do it. My dad said this supposed friend, he didn't want to tell me the name, obviously, but he said his also since died. And the friend ended shot her because Larry couldn't do it.
Yeah, there's no evidence of that. And in Larry's confession alone, what Larry said in his confession supports the facts, with the exception of he said he tried to scare her and he didn't remember he shot her a second time, and he didn't remember covering up. But everything else that he said, she wouldn't go to bed with him. She slept on the couch. He was angry that she was going to sleep on the couch, and that, he came out and he sat on the other couch. All of that supports how she was actually killed.
Again, this is like one of those really half-assed theories, rumors. I don't think anything of it, really. So, to wrap this up, I just want to talk about how interesting it is perspective-wise. Anyone I ever heard talk about this case, including my own family, made it out that this woman was evil, mean, drunk, and people kind of insinuated that she kind of deserved it. Growing up and learning more about the world, I realized that even if she was some of these things, he could have ended their relationship in other ways. If you had no personal relationships with either the victim or the killer, there's a lot of different motives here that he had to kill her. The unwanted pregnancy, fighting over settlement money, her not wanting to be a housewife, and wanting to buy her own bar, marital infidelity, so on and so on. So my final thoughts about my final thoughts are about the craziness of the sentence that he got for this. He served somewhere between 5 and 8 years, like I said, and that's a fact. That is wild to me. You can get more years for drug-related offenses. He murdered his pregnant wife, then left her for her 2 young children to find. I would like to say this is out of the ordinary, the sentence. But in the U.S., the justice system is set up so half-assed and stupid sometimes that, it's not really that strange. But it is fucked up. So hopefully Bonnie's children grew up with some semblance of normalcy and happiness. It's hard to believe that they did, though. That's all I really have for you today on this. I thought it was, this is a story I've known, like I said, for my whole life.
All right, so did I grow up happy? I did. I mean, I was loved. I grew up in an incredible family. I grew up poor. My brother's dad, Jerry Ostrander, and then Margaret O'Brien, who was my adopted mom, who raised me from 7 until the rest of this. When I say my brothers and sisters, I'm talking about my adopted siblings, Rachel, Tanya, Chuck, and then me and my brother, Jerry. The 7 of us were a family. And my dad raised 4 kids that weren't his. I love my dad to this day. In fact, we were texting yesterday, and I sent him a link to some behind the scenes footage where I talked about him and mom and one of the most important lessons they ever taught me. And I, in fact, I said, this is my exchange with my old man yesterday. And believe me, my dad is a man of very, very few words. He said, I got your video. I'm proud of you. I said, Dad, I wanted you to see that for yourself. I am the man I am because of you and Mom. And I won't ever forget it. I wanted you to know there's a whole audience in my industry who knows it too. I tell lessons that I learned from my father all the time. And he said, thank you. I can't wait to come down and see you guys for the wedding. Yes, I grew up happy. And I'm successful. Financially, with my family, with my friends. I'm blessed. I'm just grateful and blessed. And, there's this whole video about the story of Walker Reynolds, and Zach asks me in that video, would I change the past? And I say, no, I wouldn't. I've thought about it a lot. And yeah, it's a romantic thought that I'd grow up with my mom, but everything happens for a reason. And I am who I am because of what happened to me. And I like who I am. And if, God never gives us more than we can handle. And if someone's got to go through that, I'm okay with it being me because I know I can handle it. That's what I say. My brother Jerry, he took a different path, but he's still a wonderful human being. My brother Jerry played a huge role in who I am. He's one of the greatest. I mean, my kids have lots of aunts and uncles. It doesn't matter which kid you talk to in our family, who their favorite uncle is. It's my brother Jerry. Okay, he's just a big fucking kid. He happens to be a badass. And, he's been to prison a couple of times for beating the shit out of people. But that doesn't mean his heart isn't 5 times the size of a normal heart, But we were blessed. I mean, the family that raised us loved us. And they gave us values and a foundation that made all the difference in the world. My dad protected me. My mom protected me. I didn't always agree with how they parented, and I didn't always agree with some of their decisions, but, post facto, they were right. They approached it like they were raising adults. They did a phenomenal job. The lesson for my kids, the reason I would do this, there's no challenge you can face in your life that you can't overcome with the right values and the right mindset. But it's important to note, You know, my mom played a huge role in who I am. My mom was an incredibly loving mother. You know, my mom, you know, she always wanted a daughter. She didn't raise my older brother Bobby because she couldn't. Like when she left her first husband, she didn't have the means to take care of him. You know, and when she got pregnant with me, and then I was born, and my adopted dad who raised me, he actually was in the delivery room when I was born. You know, I was always with her, and my brother Jerry was always with her. Like you know, but I have two brothers who were raised by their dads. And then she raised me and my brother Jerry. And then we were taken in by Jerry's dad after she died. My mom, you talk to my brother Jerry and you talk to me, and we will tell you that she was an incredible mother. The most loving, you know, I learned how to dance from my mom. I learned how to be me from my mom. I learned I was special from my mom. She's the one who grabbed me by the face and said, Walker, you're special. There's something about you that you're different than all these other kids. God blessed you with a gift. I got introduced to the church because of my mom. I knew that you went to church on Wednesday nights for Bible study because of my mom. You know, I got introduced to my love of music is because of my mom. You know, how close I am to my brother is because of my mom. My mom was the one who used to preach to us the importance that family is what matters. But here's another thing. I learned how to survive from my mom. My mom was a survivor. She didn't let the challenges in her life defeat her. And yet, you know, she didn't make great choices in partners. But what really bothers me, has always bothered me, is that my mom didn't deserve to die. You know, she deserved to live out the rest of her days trying to continually grow every day, just like the rest of us. And she had that taken from her. And the fact that anyone would apologize for that's ridiculous. All right. So top to bottom, here's what happened. All right. And I did this on an Instagram reel, but I'll do it again real quick. February 16th, 1982, I told you my mom left with a friend to go to Owego so she could go visit her husband who was in jail. My mom was pregnant. She was, I think she was 8 to 10 weeks pregnant at the time. It was in the middle of the week. This was probably a Wednesday, I think. We could look it up. But actually, let's look it up. Let's ask old Chat GPT. What day was February 16, 1982? It was a Tuesday. Okay. So when I got home from school on Tuesday at 3:00, Larry sent me and my brother. He was drunk. He sent me and my brother to the babysitter. My mom got back. They get into a disagreement. He goes upstairs. She tells her friends that she's got to go upstairs eventually and take her ass whooping. She goes upstairs. They get into a fight. This is based on his confession. She says she's going to sleep on the couch. They had been arguing for a couple of weeks about whether she would keep the baby because of his drug use. Okay. That day he got sent home from work because he went to work drunk at the farm. He went and grabbed a pistol that he had bought like a week and a half before, came out, sat down on the couch, pointed the gun at her and shot her. Bullet went in the back of her head, came out of her nose, went into her left forearm. He got up, he shot her in the right temple, and it exited the left temple. We know that from the ballistics. One cartridge was over by the TV, one was at her feet. Okay. He goes downstairs, he robs the bar. He covers her with a sheet. He goes downstairs, robs the bar of a couple of bottles of whiskey and the bag of cash. He goes to a friend's house, passes out on the guy's couch. Then he leaves and starts heading to Florida. The next morning, me and my brother come home. We're in the room with her for 45 minutes before I get up and pull the sheet back, because I broke the TV. I pull the sheet back and she was dead. We run out. We run down the street. We try to tell people that our mom's dead. Nobody believes us. This is the craziest part of the story. There was a diner. We go into the diner. We're in our fucking pajamas, We're like, our mom's dead. Nobody believes us. We run down to the babysitter, tell her that our mom's dead. No one believes us. They send us back and they tell us to get the neighbor. I can't remember what the guy's name was, but there was another apartment. And we went there and we got him, and he's the one who went over and found her. And I remember him just standing there looking at her, And then all hell breaks loose, and we pop around all day. They move us from this place to that place. Finally, the police department, and then my dad comes and picks us up that night. Larry turned around, went back to Cortland, and he took the gun and he put it underneath the front seat of the car that he parked next to, and then he went in and turned himself into his buddy. He got charged with 2 counts of murder, second-degree murder. He was out on bail. That was pretty normal at the time, I guess. And then he got into a bad motorcycle accident, said he didn't remember his confession. And because my adopted family wouldn't let me and my brother testify, and because the appellate court was really weird about confessions at that time, they accepted a plea agreement of 2 counts of second-degree attempted manslaughter. And he got sentenced to 12 to 20 years in prison, and he served 5 and in Attica. He got out. He moved to Lake Como, which is, 20 miles north of where he killed my mom. Got fucking married, believe it or not. And he told everyone from that day forward that, all his friends and everyone were apologists for him. He didn't do it. He was set up. He was, and then he died in his sleep at the age of 39. And my brother and I were adopted, and we were raised in a great family, loving family. And that's where I am today. All right, Nick. So I'm going to send you this link, buddy. You didn't text me, and you didn't DM me back. And, my understanding is Nick lost his wife a couple of years ago, and at least that's what my team told me. And I'm sorry for your loss, man, really, if that's true. I assume it is. But I would implore you, Nick, that we redo this. That if you were going to take the time to shoot this 25-minute podcast and broadcast all of the bullshit, that you do a solid and we shoot the truth. Or is the closest thing to the truth that we have, since I'm the only person who's ever seen those case files that are alive. George Denny's died. But with that, my mom's name was Bonnie Mae Austin. And she was an incredible mother. She really was. And probably the worst thing she ever did was, well, not probably. The worst thing she ever did was choose to marry Larry Martin. I held no ill will towards Larry. By the time I was 12, I said, hey, if he asked for forgiveness, I'd give it to him. And I guess the lesson to you, to anyone in my family or anyone else watching this, is that when you hold on to hate and when you hold on to, the negative feelings that come when someone wrongs you, you're the one who gets hurt. It's your heart that gets hurt. And the best way to set yourself free is to forgive. You don't have to forget, but you got to forgive. And you do that in your own time. And make no mistake about it. The fundamental difference between me and my brother He had all the gifts I have. I didn't let my heart turn black towards Larry. I found a way to forgive and take the high road. And I don't hate him. I can honestly say that. You know, I don't. All right, Nick, buddy. Ball's in your court. Thank you guys for watching. Like, subscribe, comment down below, and I'll see you in the next one.